So we appreciate your attendance. You either live or work near these lines, you engage in excavation activities near these lines, or your emergency or response agency plans or conducts exercises in response to incidents around these lines, or you're a public official who impacts community growth, land use planning, and development. We'll take some time at the end of the presentation as well to kind of show you some of the features of the APAC program. And, if you do have questions at any point in time, I'll just kind of take this as a reminder. Type them in the questions field, as well as if you're coming on board a little bit late, make sure that you type your organization name and your name in the field as well, in the questions field as well. Also, anyone else that's sitting in with you, so we can kind of document those things. So we've got a pretty extensive list of pipeline operators that participate in the APAC program. One thing I'll mention is any gas or pipeline operator in the state is actually a member of the 811 system. You don't have to worry about that. The other thing I will also take time to mention, though, is that all the operators that you see here choose to participate in this program. It is completely voluntary. So, there are some gas and pipeline operators that are still members of 811, but not members of the APAC program, and they choose to do other routes and for their public awareness goals. What I'll tell you is there's another group that does and conducts meetings. If you have that opportunity, what we always kind of tell everyone and encourage is to attend both. That's the best thing to do, in my opinion. Get as much information as you possibly can, gather as much information as you can. But we've got a large, extensive list. We are definitely the largest kind of group that kind of helps everybody sync things together in the state. And so we've been working on it for a very long time. We've got a great group of pipeline operators in the state that are very, very easy to deal with and very enjoyable to work with. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background, some of the things we want to mention, make sure we want to emphasize. It's always important to start by kind of making sure that we say a few things, which is the United States does have the largest energy network of pipelines in the world, housing approximately 2.5 million miles and growing, with 70+ thousand others running through Alabama. It's very important that we start with emphasizing the fact that these pipelines are safe. They're the safest means of transporting these commodities from point A to point B. Pipeline products reach their destination safely more than 99.99% of the time. But the reason we're kind of here is, in the unlikely event that an incident does occur, we do want to provide with some basic information and steps that could potentially save your life. So we just want to kind of make sure we emphasize the safety, reliability of these pipelines and these pipeline systems. But the requirements that Fems requires with these pipeline operators is to make sure that we have regular contact with these different target audiences to make sure that they're prepared just in case of an incident. Also, an emphasis, one of the biggest things that I want to emphasize during this meeting, as far as when we start talking about components of a system, is just the role the pipeline operator plays in assuring the safety of their systems. They've got so many things that they have to do, including the ones that you see listed here, plus many more. But just kind of making sure that we state that the pipeline operators play such an important role. As I mentioned a minute ago, we have an excellent group of pipeline operators in the state, a lot of great people that are super easy to work with and want to work with you. So we'll kind of get into the presentation and discuss a little bit at a couple of times, and I'll probably repeat myself. But working with these folks, coordinating with them, the first time that you see these operators does not need to be at an incident site or scene. There's several key features and basic components we mention each year. So when we talk about other components, we kind of also make sure that we explain the 3 different types of systems. So in no particular order, your first is your transmission liner system, which is going to transport crude oil and natural gas, usually from their respective gathering system to either refinery, processing, or storage facility, or transport that product and natural gas basically to your distribution type systems. Secondly is your distribution system. It's going to be what your local gas company is typically considered. It's going to receive its natural gas many times from these transmission type pipelines and then distribute it to the commercial and residential end users. Then last is your gathering system, which is going to transport crude oil and natural gas basically from a wellhead or a production site to a central collection point. Usually going to be, when we talk about diameter, pipelines can range anywhere from 48 inches wide to just a ½ inch wide. So just kind of depends on the type of system. Your transmission lines and systems are typically going to be your larger pipelines that operate at much higher pressures. So these are the ones that, part of the reason we're here is if one of these were to get ruptured or damaged, obviously it's probably going to make the national news. Secondly, with your distribution line, much smaller lines operating at much smaller pressures. So think about the line that's running into your home, significantly smaller than a 48-inch pipeline. And lastly, your gathering system, they're going to be larger than your distribution, but typically the size and also the length. These transmission lines typically travel long distances. The gathering lines are not going to be near as long, but definitely larger than your distribution. So just some generalized information. There's some simple and effective ways that everyone can help in the prevention of incidents. One of the biggest is just understanding safe excavation practices and also making sure the notification of the underground utilities in the area prior to any and every excavation is carried out. Third party damage is actually the leading cause of damage that the operators basically have the least amount of control over. So, relationship between safety and the notification of the underground utilities and the use of 811 is vitally important. There's a reason these pipeline operators help to advertise 811 as well. Recently, also, the Alabama dig law was changed. There's been some pretty impactful changes in its law that's going to emphasize what we'll kind of talk about in a few different steps a little bit later. But one of the biggest ones that I'll go ahead and mention is just the mention and the implementation of the new enforcement process, which is actually current, active, and there are penalties that have been levied down. So it's going to make it much easier, basically, for a utility to file a complaint against an excavator. But in addition to that, it's going to make it much easier for an excavator to file a complaint against a utility if they're not holding up their end of the bargain either. So it is called the Alabama Utility Damage Prevention Authority, is the enforcement authority on it. That's ALUDPA.org. But it is active currently. What we kind of say is that the system will only work if complaints are filed. It is a complaint driven system, so we encourage you, if you're having some problems and issues on a consistent basis, make sure you file those complaints. One that I'll kind of mention is my neighbor that's actually 2 doors down from me has had his internet line cut twice for folks coming out and doing water taps and never calling or entering a locate request whatsoever. And he works from home, and he's an accountant for a pretty large aggregate firm, nationwide aggregate firm, so Vulcan Materials. So long story short, with that, he had actually wanted to know what the recourse or what some consequences were for that, and he filed a complaint here recently. So everyone just understanding has a role in damage prevention and in preventing injuries and obviously loss of life. So just help these operators as much as possible by being those eyes and ears in your community, doing everything you're supposed to do, and then just kind of also understanding what kind of a trickle down effect there is if an incident basically were to occur. So you could be responsible for a water outage, so putting more than just what's going on at that direct site or scene. You could cause a hazardous flammable liquid or gas release, cutting a major communication line and cutting 911 services. That has happened before. One thing I say as well is, putting local emergency responders in harm's way to an incident. Basically, if that incident was avoidable, now you've got other people that are involved in that situation, and obviously you don't want to be responsible for an injury or loss of life. One thing I've kind of mentioned is we understand that doing the right thing might take a little bit more time, and time is definitely money. We understand that, and the way that a lot of these installations are going, people are rushing. But the main thing is you want to make sure that you're not responsible for any of those situations we just listed here. In addition to that, making sure you put some emphasis on taking the time and doing things properly. Also, too, just talking about some of the other components. Most pipelines are obviously underground, and signs like the ones that are pictured here help to mark or indicate the location of a pipeline in a right-of-way, and are also a good indicator of the presence of a pipeline in the area. They're going to be typically located where these pipelines intersect public road crossings, river crossings, and railways and other high traffic type areas. As we mention each year, they usually contain three things, which is the type of product, the name of the operator, and also a 24-hour emergency number. We also mention each year that markers are only an indicator of the presence of a pipeline in the area, and they cannot be used to determine the exact location of a pipeline. Another identification or another way to help with the location of a pipeline and pipeline facilities we mention each year is your National Pipeline Mapping System. There's different levels of access depending on your organization, but the system will provide you with a map and contact information for specifically the gas transmission and hazardous liquid pipelines in your area. This cannot be used in lieu of the 811 system. This is a great tool to be used when you're planning or preparing or knowing who's in your area. This will not indicate and show you the location of your local type gas distribution systems, only your hazardous material and liquid type larger pipelines that travel through the area, but it is a great tool. The three basic ways of using your senses we talk about each and every year and are required, which is see, smell, and hear. So looking for water bubbling, dirt or water being blown into the air, dead vegetation, discolored soil, etc., those kind of things. listening for a noise that can range from a small hissing to a loud roaring or the impact of an explosion. And also smelling any strange or unusual odor, either that petroleum smell or if it's natural gas, the rotten egg type smell. Just remember that some gases or some pipelines are also odorless, and an odorant cannot always be added. So just ensure that you use all your senses and just kind of understand the signs of any type of leak or release that might be in the area. If you do notice suspicious activity near that pipeline or you suspect damage, make sure you contact that pipeline operator's emergency number as soon as it's safe to do so. It's also important to contact the operator immediately if, while digging, you expose or make contact with one of their lines. Even seemingly minor contact, such as a scrape, gouge, crease, can be serious, because it can result in a future leak if it's not inspected and or repaired. Also, do not cover an exposed pipeline. Call the operator immediately so they can come out and inspect and make repairs if they're warranted. We also talked earlier about the potential outcomes of utility damage. More specifically, what are some of a release? Obviously, most products are going to be flammable, so fires to structures, destruction of property. A release can have negative impacts on your personal health and the environment, hearing loss, asphyxiation, obvious loss of service. There's fines and repair costs that be expensive. And then the main thing is once again, injury, loss of life. Those are the things we're trying to avoid. The chart that you see here is actually included in that downloadable booklet or in that booklet form. It just kind of gives you a brief description of some of the characteristics of some of the potential hazards of the different types of product releases, highlighting a few. Natural gas lighter than air will typically rise and dissipate or travel the path of least resistance. It can cause irritation, asphyxiation, and under the right air mixtures can be extremely flammable and ignited. Highly volatile liquids, including natural gas liquids, liquid petroleum gas, propane, butane, are heavier than air. They're going to collect or pool. Can cause many health issues, and just like natural gas does have flammability possibilities also. Crude oil and refined products such as diesel fuel, jet fuel, and heating oil, heavier than air, will collect in low-lying areas, and there's many health concerns as well, such as skin irritation, central nervous system shutdown, and flammability. It's a good opportunity to mention the importance of knowing what's in your area and also familiarize yourself with the potential hazards that those particular products can cause. So once again, I kind of mentioned, don't let the first time that you respond to a pipeline incident be the first time that you've seen these pipeline operators. Understand as well, we have pipelines in the state that travel through the state that transport more than one product at the same time. It's in a process called batching. So one type of leak or release might turn into something else basically. So just kind of being aware of those pipelines and what products they transport. If a pipeline release occurs, what are some easy steps to follow? One is obviously to leave the area immediately, eliminate all potential ignition sources, abandon equipment, move into a crosswind direction away from the leak or vapor cloud, and do not drive into a vapor cloud. Also, once you're in that safe situation, dial 911 immediately and contact the pipeline operator. Do not send an email, a text, and also never assume that someone else has reported that leak. To the excavator specifically, if there's any escaping explosive, corrosive, or flammable product, it is required by law, by the dig law, to contact the emergency responders and the pipeline operators directly. So the law states not contact one or the other, contact both. You as an excavator have that responsibility legally. There has actually been a case where this occurred and it was an enforceable incident, and the state attorney general's office acted on it. Also, once step 2 has occurred, making sure you stay nearby, warn others, block off the area as much as possible. Also assist in evacuating the area if there's any critical areas such as schools, daycares, or other populated public places. Pipeline operators also provide enhanced protection for high consequence areas in highly populated areas, or an area that's outside or open structure, or a facility occupied by persons who are confined, impaired mobility, or will be difficult to evacuate. Examples are beaches, playgrounds, rec facilities, nursing homes, schools, campgrounds, etc. Maintaining and managing the integrity of these pipeline systems is important to the safety of people and environment. So in these HCAs, these high consequence areas, these integrity programs, which are basically extra steps that they have to take, help to provide additional hazard assessment and prevention. Another component of some systems are your pipeline storage facilities. We have them in Alabama, which are connected to pipeline systems and safely store natural gas and liquids until it is needed. The ability to store natural gas and liquids helps ensure pipelines have an adequate supply available during times of high demand, such as cold winter days. I've just kind of said this because I think it's neat. The picture, the image that you see here is what is considered the largest 811 logo in the state of Texas. So the other interesting fact is when you see these logos, typically they are not installed by the 811 system. That is not installed. For example, the ones in Pelham, Alabama, are not installed by Alabama 811. It's such importance to these pipeline operators and these underground facilities that they also advertise 811. And so that's how a lot of times they get on there. So now we've kind of covered some of the general information. We'll go a little bit more into the Alabama 811 side of it and just what are some of the requirements. The one thing we mentioned is it's vitally important that notify Alabama 811 and allow the work site to be properly marked before beginning any type of excavation activities. Um, there's a definition I'll give you in just a minute of what excavation is, but even if you are hand digging, the best thing to do is to go ahead and put that notification in regardless. You must respect those location marks. We'll talk about the tolerance zone. That plays into it in just a minute. Also use digging and excavation best practices for your safety. So one resource I'll recommend as an excavator is what is known as the Common Ground Alliance Best Practices Guidebook. It addresses things such as locating, mapping, excavation, and other industry-wide best practices when you're working around underground infrastructure. Common Ground Alliance is a national damage prevention organization that Alabama 811 and a few other utilities in the state belong to. It is an excellent tool. It is a great damage prevention resource to have. We'll be attending the CGA conference that will be coming up in October. The best practices committee that is with the Common Ground Alliance is made up of 17 stakeholder audiences. For a best practices, for a best practice to make it in the booklet, it has to be agreed on unanimously by 100% of all the ones that attend and are part of that committee. So if one person disagrees, it doesn't make it in. So only a handful get added every year. But it's such a great addition. It's such a great asset to be able to have this, even though it's not the law in Alabama. It gives it's with it being just a guidebook. It's a phenomenal piece of information. Also, Alabama 811 at any point in time operates with well over 450, and we're probably at 500 or creeping over that now. Utility members. With the passing of the new dig law, which began in January of 2020, it phases in different elements basically over a 2-year period of time, which basically ends January 1st of this coming year. The last step is all utilities are required to be on board by January 1st of 2022 with 811 membership. If that occurs, all those utilities were to come on board, we're estimating somewhere between 700 and 900 utility companies. So we got a long way to go. Until that time, understand that there are still some utilities that are not members, and understand it is still the excavator's responsibility by law to contact those non-members directly to have their facilities marked, making a separate phone call or notification. Those members are actually still required by law to mark their facilities within the same required amount of time as any 811 member, which is 2 working days, not including the day of notification. If you're ever unsure, just know that a list of utilities is always provided on all locate requests. Have a copy emailed to you. If you enter locates on a regular basis, use the web portal. It's such a great tool. The American Public Works Association has standardized the color code system to identify and differentiate as the different types of underground facilities. This is usually done by either paint, flags, or both for this meeting's purpose. The one that we emphasize and want to discuss the most is yellow: gas, oil, steam, petroleum, and other gaseous materials. The other important color I'll go back to in a few minutes is white, and kind of explain how that, with it being labeled as proposed excavation, can be a great tool for an excavator to use. So we talked about respecting the marks earlier. So once the area is marked, understand there's a few other steps and procedures besides just entering in a locate request and having paint put on the ground to remain current with the dig law. So just because you get paint put down on the ground, there's other steps to be in compliance with the law. It's actually the responsibility of the excavator to dig with care if they have to work within the tolerance zone, which is defined in 18 inches on either side of the facility marks. It's defined to the width of the underground facility plus 18 inches on either side, and it will also grow depending on the width of the facility. If you're working within that tolerance zone, the law states that non-invasive methods of excavation have to be used to identify the exact depth and location of the mark line before proceeding with any sort of mechanized equipment. There's no exemptions for using vacuum excavation and those kind of things. Vacuum excavation is considered non-invasive though, but you still have to enter a locate request. I got that question a few weeks ago. Well, hey, if we're using vacuum excavation that's non-invasive, do we have to enter a locate request? Yes, you do. So just understanding basically understanding your obligations within that tolerance zone. Besides an excavator just specifically not calling for a locate request whatsoever, the tolerance zone is typically, and not understanding the obligations of an excavator is typically going to be more than likely your number two cause of excavation damage. So understand what you're supposed to do, understand what you're required to do. Also remember that as far as just a few other things to remember, state law defines excavation as an operation for the purpose of movement or removal of earth, rock, or other material by mechanized equipment or explosive device, and includes but is not limited to augering, backfilling, blasting, boring, digging, ditching, drilling, grading, etc. All forms of digging are considered excavation. The use of heavy equipment is not the only form. Like I said, even though all defines mechanized equipment, enter a locate request every time. Part of the reason is that hand tools are actually the third leading cause of excavation damage. So just because you're using hand tools does not necessarily mean that you're going to be 100% safe. Also, do not attempt to rebury a line after it's been exposed from the ground. Contact the pipeline operator, have them come out there and inspect. The use of Alabama 811 is a very simple process that on average just takes a few minutes to process a routine locate request. Some of the key highlights of entering a locate request are you can enter locates via phone or web. You can either call 811 or you go to al811.com. Well over 60%, I think it's about 60% of all of our locate requests actually now come in via the 811 web portal. This is a great tool. If you enter a large amount of locate requests on a regular basis, we highly recommend that you use this tool, or either you've already been contacted to use this tool. I'll talk about some of the benefits here in just a minute. Allow 2 working days for those lines to be marked, and that does not include the day of notification. I'll explain that a little bit further in a couple of slides. Also, to the exception of the 2 full working days is an emergency locate request, which can be used if those damage threats need to be addressed sooner. But just remember that abuse of an emergency locate request can result in stiff fines and penalties. And with that new upcoming enforcement process, or with the new enforcement process in place now, those fines and penalties are going to be much easier to assess. So if you're abusing the emergency locate request, it's not an emergency, basically improper planning. That's not an excuse for an emergency locate request. Provide accurate information and a good callback number on that locate request. Small, it's not in big highlighted bold or anything, but it's such an impactful thing. And this is the feedback that I get from the utilities and from the locators on a regular basis. Them not being able to get in touch with someone, not being able to get in touch with someone that's familiar with the work site and having to chase down people. Basically, provide as much information as you can on that locate request so that locator can have everything. Um, it's also the excavator's responsibility to maintain the markings. So just kind of make sure that you pay attention to that. Part of the reason why that's especially important, we want to emphasize that, is now a locate request is valid for 20 working days, not 10. And so they used to be 10. And just remember that you've got to maintain a valid dig ticket for that entire duration of the work. Your expiration and update times will be provided. Just be aware of your ticket update and expiration times. A good way to help keep that organized is through the use of the web portal. Also, Alabama 811 maintains 24-hour operations. But if you enter a locate request after 5 p.m., your day of notification would actually not begin until the next business day, which is defined as Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. Weekends and holidays are not included. I'll explain that in the chart on the next slide. Once again, as mentioned earlier, another great benefit we'll talk about right after the chart is once again white paint. So I'll kind of go back to that. This is a chart to kind of help to explain. So as far as a locate request, if you enter a locate request anytime on Monday between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., your day of notification would be Monday. Waiting all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday. Locate request clears 7 a.m. on Thursday, and the utilities are required to be marked by that time. For example, if you entered a locate request at 5:15 p.m. on Monday, your day of notification would actually not be until Tuesday, and you wait all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, you're clear Friday at 7 a.m. So that's the difference. That's what I was trying to explain just a second ago. All right, so kind of something else we mentioned, and I just kind of wanted to emphasize, was how the use of white paint, which is the color for proposed excavation, that's the excavator's color to show where they need the work done or where they're going to be conducting the work, and it can show the utilities and show the locators. We had a group call after the first time we talked about this, after the first webinar session last week. They're going to try to start implementing this. They thought it was a great idea. They thought it was a great tool. So white paint can help you to narrow down the scope of work so you don't narrow locate request and say locate the entire property. That's the thing that we're trying to avoid. It's going to be helpful for the locator. One of the companies we talked with and interviewed last year said that he's eliminated about 90% of the callbacks that he was getting from locators and utilities just by putting the white paint because there's no questions asked. We also say don't go outside the scope of that white paint if you put it down. Understand you need to work within that realm or area, or you've got to enter a locate request or have it modified or changed. But anyway, white paint can be a great tool. Also, too, just kind of talking about the uses and benefits of positive response. So the reason we kind of suggest that you go online and start utilizing the Alabama 811 website and some of the other tools is a utility responding back into the 811 system with a status update of whether that facility's been marked, cleared, et cetera, is now required. That started in January 1st of this year. And so most of the utilities are actually responding back into positive response now. But it's a great tool because now you can go and see whether or not that utility has responded to your locate request. This helps the excavators know, like I said, as you can see from the chart here, you've got 4 that were cleared, and then you had 1 with the water department where the located and the facilities were marked. So this is on all locate requests now. Very handy tool to have. If you're an excavator and you enter a locate request on a regular basis, the web portal I've mentioned a few times allows you to view and enter your locate request online. Is highly recommended. It allows you to have access to so many features that you don't get by just calling. So like I said, about 60% of all the locate requests, which is going to be estimated about 600,000 this year, come in via the 811 web portal. You can search for tickets. It kind of keeps your specific tickets organized. You can view the positive responses. You can view your update times. You can actually enter your locate request via here, and you can also map your own locate request once you get to a certain level. So very handy tool. Go to al811.com, click on the web portal locate entry link. There's tons of training videos that are available. It's a very simple process once you kind of get in the habit of using it. Also, too, I wanted to kind of make mention of the Alabama Damage Prevention Summit. It's alabama.damagepreventionsummit.com, I believe, or you can just go to the Alabama 811 website at al811.com. Should be able to click on that Alabama Damage Prevention Summit link. Registration's still open. September 28th through 30th currently. It's at Perdido Beach Resort. But if you want an idea as far as what's going on in the underground industry in Alabama and both nationwide as a whole, this is a great tool, a great resource to take advantage of. We've had some phenomenal presentations and discussions over the past several years to kind of really kind of get in depth, having some good roundtable discussions and bringing people in that have a really good perspective. Engineering, GIS, we've got tracks for kind of both of those, utilities, even public officials. This might be something you're interested in. So just kind of wanted to mention it. We can always provide you more information on that if needed. And I just kind of mentioned the Alabama 811 website as well. There's so many great tools that are available in there. One of the great tools that has started and is fairly new is the homeowner link for a locate request. I've sent several people to this, and I've gotten a favorable response about how easy it is. So if you're a homeowner, one of my neighbors or one of my friends was putting a fence in a couple of months back. I sent him the link. He input it in. He said, man, that was so easy. So this is something you can advertise. The homeowner link is a great tool. You can look at copies of the law, the excavation manual. There's so many great resources on this 811 website. So as a utility or as an excavator, just make sure you're knowledgeable about what is available on here. So kind of getting into the last little section of emergency response information, just know that pipeline operators, one of the things that we've talked about before is just emphasizing the fact that they want to be your partners in maintaining safety and responding to a pipeline incident in the unlikely event one should occur. The first priority obviously is to always once again protect life. Pipeline operators also try to maintain these close relationships with emergency response officials. These meetings help to bridge that relationship. As an emergency responder, just make sure that you have these. You don't want the first time you see a pipeline operator to be on a pipeline incident. Work with these folks. If they have training, if they'll come do a mock drill with you, just whatever that's available, make sure you've got that relationship. And then also make sure you've got their most up-to-date contact information. Also, too, we ask each emergency response agency, if you haven't done so, just one per department. You don't have to fill one out for each person. There's a capability survey that was both mailed out to you and then also in the upper right-hand corner of the APAC website, apacpipelineawareness.com. Click on the capability survey, provide your capabilities as an emergency responder back to those utility companies, back to those pipeline operators. So that's available. Also, the APACT operator profiles, to give you an idea, when we're talking about providing communication and tools for you, these are little one-page PDFs. And what all it is it's we have them for almost all the APAC pipeline operators. You click on it, what it has on it is it has their emergency number, a non-emergency number, basic contact information, what type of facility or what type of product they transport, and then a basic general location of their facilities. So it's a good little one pager to have kind of a resource book and access. The APAC website, we'll talk about a little bit later, is available year round, and those profiles are as well. Other tools is the Fems Emergency Response Guidebook, which provides first responders with kind of a go-to manual to help deal with hazmat transportation accidents during the critical first 30 minutes. There's a section specifically addressing pipeline emergencies and components as well. The guidebook does come out every 4 years. The 2020 version came out late last year. You can Google PHMSA ERG and it should show it or pull it up. The link is there at the bottom. If that link is too long to kind of copy down at the moment, we can also provide that to you at a later time as well. So helpful tips we discussed when we're responding to an incident. Some of the real basics are eliminate potential ignition sources, motors, firearms, phones, radios, cigarettes, static discharge from your clothing. All those could be ignition sources. Also notify emergency responders in the area if you're an excavator. And then what we mentioned earlier as far as notify the pipeline operator immediately. They need to be responding as soon as possible so they can come up with a course of action. Also, when responding to a leak or release, remain on standby, a safe distance away from the incident as an emergency responder, not directly over the incident, just in case there's a reignition. And then also remain on standby until you're given the all clear by the pipeline operator. If a product does ignite, extinguishing a primary fire can result in an explosive reignition. Unless totally necessary to protect life, do not extinguish a primary fire unless the fuel source has been isolated and you've been instructed to do so. Unless under the instruction of pipeline personnel, once again, we mention every year, do not operate pipeline equipment, including valves. Additional tips, make sure you assess that situation. Park a safe distance away, eliminate your ignition sources, and approach upwind with caution. Do not park over manhole covers or storm drains. Do not walk into vapor clouds or puddles of liquid. Use appropriate air monitoring equipment when it's available. Also, always respond in full gear until you know the extent of the release. Secure that scene as well, whether you're an emergency responder or an excavator, and help to evacuate if needed and make sure no one else is getting involved in that incident. Those are just kind of some other little tips that we discuss. Also, the Alabama Pipeline Emergency Response Initiative is another tool to help educate emergency responders around the state. It's going to focus more on in-depth tactics and scenarios that courses such as this program cannot tackle in the 35 or 40 minutes that we have. The course will currently be offered at no cost as a 4-hour continuing education course for fire, EMS, and APOST. They're currently already conducting the course. They've done several shifts of some different departments. For more information on this, there's 2 contact people. The one I have up here is Brent Penny. He's kind of the over the program, and then Don Williamson is the one that's kind of been conducting the training. But Brent's contact information is just bpenny, Penny, at alabamafirecollege.org. We talked briefly about going back to the APAC website. I just wanted to point out that the site is available year-round. It's got further explanation on roles and responsibilities. It also has a contact us link if you have any additional questions. It has the operator profiles. There'll be a link to a YouTube video recording of one of the webinars that we conducted. That link will also be made available after the webinars are done this week. Also, too, once the year's meeting dates and times have been listed, which is typically May, we'll try to do the meetings in July and August again next year. Hopefully, we'll be able to get back to face-to-face, but that's another thing that will be listed typically in about May. You'll be able to kind of start signing up for them. A few other links, some of these we mentioned, some of these we did not, are useful. These are also in the booklet we included because they all have just a lot of them have some basic information, some of them are more advanced. But just some other great resources and tools that are available. This is kind of a second set of them: Pipeline Emergencies, Pipeline 101, Common Ground Alliance. Also, contact information for Alabama Public Service Commission, Gas Pipeline Safety Division. They are the ones that inspect many of our pipeline operators in the state, and then ultimately turn that information over to PHMSA. And then lastly, as we kind of recap here, one thing I want to mention is if you came on board a little bit late, what I need you to do is make sure in the questions tab on your toolbar. If you will enter your organization name, your name, and anyone else that might be sitting in with you. We need you to do that real quick because we are tallying up and getting an attendee list together, and that's also going to help us with an attendee list for the door process here in about 3 or 4 minutes. But what we kind of lastly always end with is just mentioning that pipeline safety is a shared responsibility. Large or small, there's a reason you were invited because we all play an important role in the protection of our underground infrastructure. And obviously, the main goal is the protection of lives.